How to prepare your garden for winter. If you are new to gardening, you may not know the importance of preparing your garden for winter. Just as you get the soil ready to plant, your garden needs some tending to finish up the growing season. You can clear out any leaves that have fallen, remove all of the dead plants and produce after your last harvest, and trim your perennials. You can also plant bulbs that will bloom in the spring and plant cover crops to keep the soil active. Lastly, you can test the soil and add amendments like lime or sulfur, lay a thick covering of compost which will add nutrients, and cover your garden with mulch to help regulate the temperature through the cold months. Method 1. Clearing out your garden. 1. Bring less hardy plants inside. Some of your plants won't have died yet, but they won't be strong enough to withstand the winter weather. You'll want to research the specific plants you have in your garden and find out which ones can be easily moved inside for the winter. You could move them to a greenhouse, your garage, or even inside. If you do this, you'll need to carefully dig them up and replant them into an appropriate pot. Most pepper plants can be brought inside and will still grow for a while into winter. Make sure you clean off the plants so no bugs travel inside. Some other plants that can be brought inside are aloe, citrus, geraniums, impatiens, and rosemary. 2. Clear away fallen leaves and compost them. If you have trees anywhere near your garden, you most likely have some leaves that have accumulated. You'll want to gather these up and save them for composting. A good leaf blower and mulcher saves a lot of time here. You can begin a temporary compost pile off to the side of your garden as you prepare in the weeks leading up to winter, or you can store compost matter in a trash can or bin until you are ready to use it. 3. Tidy up your perennials. Perennials are plants that grow for more than 2 seasons, but they are not active during the winter. They go into a period of dormancy. You can help them grow fresh again in the spring by cutting them down to the level of the soil. The root of the plant will remain and bloom again in spring. You can leave any seeds that are present for birds to eat during the winter. Common perennials include lilies, black-eyed Susans, lavender, ferns, and primrose. 4. Remove all dead leaves and produce from the remaining plants. Go through your garden section by section, plant by plant, and pull off any leaves that are brown and any fruits or vegetables which are rotten. You can put all of this into a bin to add as compost later on. Dead plant matter can harbor disease or insects that will later kill your plants. Removing all of this from the garden protects it for new growth in the spring. If you notice obvious diseased or infested plant matter, burn this separately and don't include in your compost. Some people may feel that it's easier to leave the old plants to die in the winter, but this can end up causing your garden to be worse off. The effort it takes to clear out the old plants will pay off by preserving your garden's health. 5. Pay attention to your climate. The exact work your garden needs, and the state it will be in come spring, will be greatly determined by what your winter is like. If you get heavy snow, you may consider building a cover to keep all that snow off your garden. If you have pretty mild winters, you may not need to do all that much for the garden. For this and many other garden issues, talking to people around you who garden can be really helpful. If you can find anyone in your area who has been gardening for years, they will know how local winter weather affects gardens. Method 2. Planting winter hardy crops. 1. Leave some vegetables for a winter harvest. Carrots, garlic, horseradish, leeks, parsnips, radishes, and turnips can be left in the ground into the winter months for late harvesting. You'll want to mark the spots with a tall stake so you can see it above the snow. These hardy plants can help a little bit as you use up other vegetables that stop growing during the fall. 2. Dig up and bury some vegetables for storage into winter. With carrots, potatoes, and cabbage, you can dig them up, dig a new hole, and place them with the roots above the ground. This creates a cellar-like storage that will keep them fresh until you want them later in the winter. If your area typically gets snow, you'll want to mark their spots with a stake so you remember where they are at. 3. Plant some vegetables for a winter or early spring harvest. As long as you get them into the ground before the first frost, spinach, garlic, rhubarb, and shallots can be planted late in the fall. Spinach will most likely be ready by late winter, and the rest should be ready when spring hits. This is a good way to have fresh produce for a little bit more time throughout the year. 4. Plant bulbs that will bloom in the spring. Many plants start out as bulbs, and when you plant them in the fall, they take root and will bloom early on in the spring. These are good for keeping plants in the soil rather than taking everything out for winter. Tulip, daffodil, crocus, snowdrop, bluebell and iris bulbs are good to plant for an early to late spring bloom. A helpful tip is to lay some evergreen boughs over spots where you plant bulbs. This will help keep the soil from cracking and moving the bulbs around. Some methods for tulip planting might be useful to apply to other bulb types. 5. Plant some cover crops. Cover crops are able to sustain winter weather and can protect your garden from erosion. Cereal rye and buckwheat are common cover crops. Generally, you sow these seeds a month before an expected frost. Later you dig them up before they fully seed and blossom. These types of plants help keep the microbes of the soil active while other plants are in dormancy. It is important to keep them trimmed down so they don't overrun your whole garden. These crops are usually tilled over in the spring to mix back into the soil as more compost. Method 3: Protecting and nourishing the soil. 1. Test soil and add amendments that will work into the soil before spring. Once most of your plants are harvested and done growing, it's good to improve your soil for the next season. Take a soil sample to a garden store or agriculture extension office and have them test it. A soil test can tell you the pH of your soil and relative levels of potassium, phosphorus, calcium, magnesium, and sulfur, which are important for healthy growth. A test can also tell you how much organic matter is present and about the lead content. You can search online or a local business directory to find garden stores near you, and you can call to see what soil testing options they have. At the very least, you can buy pretty simple home testing kits which should give you the basic information you need. Many universities and colleges have agriculture extension offices that you can contact to find out if they are able to test soil. Treatments like lime take a few months to work into the soil, so applying them in the winter helps ensure the soil will be adjusted by spring for planting. 2. Lay down a generous amount of compost. Shredded leaves and plant matter left over in your garden are great for putting nutrients back into the soil during winter. Throughout the fall, gather brown and green plant matter into a compost pile or bin and cover your whole garden with it after you have cleaned up all of the plants. As this stuff decomposes during winter, it keeps some of the moisture in the soil during the dry times of winter. Even though not much is growing, composting during the winter will keep the soil healthier. If you have enough compost matter, 1-2 inches is a good thickness for a layer of compost. If you don't have much compost to work with, you can lay it only on the rows where you actually plant crops, leaving walking rows and the edges of the garden without compost. 3. Cover the garden with mulch. Much like compost, mulch helps protect the soil from erosion, temperature changes, and animals. While the compost will nourish the soil during the dormant period, mulch is sort of a way to cover the compost and keep it protected. Common mulch options include peat moss, bark, sawdust, and shredded newspapers. While you probably can't avoid the ground freezing if you live somewhere with consistently low winter temperatures, the compost and mulch layers help keep the ground temperature regulated against multiple freezes and thaws. Mulch and compost serve similar purposes, so if your options are limited, you can go with just mulch. Otherwise, you can lay the mulch down on top of the compost.